Welcome back. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. It helps YouTube know you want more videos like this. All right, ready? Turn off the lights and listen closely.
When I was 19 years old, I took a spontaneous road trip from Sacramento to visit my cousin in Albuquerque. This was back in 2007, before smartphones and GPS were really a thing, so I was navigating with a printed MapQuest route and a road atlas my dad insisted I bring along. I left early in the morning, planning to make it to Flagstaff by nightfall, but I hit unexpected traffic outside of Vegas that set me back by nearly 3 hours. By the time I crossed into Arizona, the sun was already setting, and I was exhausted. My original plan to push through to Flagstaff seemed impossible. I was nodding off at the wheel, jerking awake every few minutes with my heart pounding. I knew I needed to stop. Around 9 p.m., I saw a sign for a place called the Desert Rose Motel Inn. The sign was one of those old neon ones, half the letters flickering or completely dark, so it read DESTROEMORN. Something about it looked forgotten, like it had been there since the 1960s, and nobody had bothered to update it since. I almost drove past it. The place just had this vibe? You know what I mean? That feeling in your gut that says, keep driving? But I was so tired, and the next town, according to my atlas, was another 47 miles away. I didn't trust myself to make it that far without falling asleep at the wheel. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for 2 other cars, both looking like they'd seen better days. The motel itself was a single-story L-shaped building, painted a faded coral pink. About half the rooms had their lights on behind drawn curtains, though I couldn't see any movement or hear any sounds. The office was attached to the main building, and when I walked in, a bell above the door chimed. The room smelled like cigarette smoke and something else. Something sweet and rotting that I couldn't quite place. There was a tiny woman behind the counter, probably in her 70s, wearing a floral housecoat and watching a small TV that was playing what looked like a church sermon. "Need a room?" she asked without looking away from the screen. "Yes, ma'am. Just for one night. $60, cash only." I was a broke college student, but I had emergency cash from my mom. I counted out 3 20s and slid them across the counter. The woman finally looked at me then, her eyes sharp and assessing behind thick bifocals. "You traveling alone?" "Yes, ma'am." She made a clicking sound with her tongue, like she disapproved, then pulled a key attached to a large plastic tag from a pegboard behind her. "Room 7, around the corner. Don't open your door for anyone after midnight. Checkout's at 10 a.m. The way she said it, "Don't open your door for anyone after midnight," it wasn't like friendly advice. It was a warning, delivered in a flat, matter-of-fact tone that made my skin prickle. Is there a problem I should know about?" "Just don't open your door after midnight." She turned back to her sermon. I stood there for a moment, wanting to ask more questions, but something about her body language told me the conversation was over. I took the key and left. Room 7 was around the corner, just like she said, positioned near the end of the building. The door was painted the same faded coral as the exterior, with the number 7 in brass screwed slightly crooked above the peephole. I unlocked it and stepped inside. The room was exactly what you'd expect from a budget roadside motel. 2 double beds with matching floral bedspreads that looked like they hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. A boxy TV bolted to a dresser, a single lamp with a stained shade, an industrial carpet, and a pattern probably chosen specifically to hide stains. The bathroom was tiny but appeared clean enough. I locked the door, fastened the chain lock, and checked the windows. They were secured with simple latches, nothing fancy. The curtains were heavy and dark, and when I pulled them shut, they blocked out the parking lot lights completely. I was starving, but I was too tired to go searching for food. I ate a granola bar from my bag, took a quick shower, and climbed into bed. Despite the weird vibe of the place and the old woman's strange warning, I was asleep within minutes. I don't know what time it was when I first heard it. My phone was charging across the room and I didn't have a watch, but it felt late. That deep, heavy part of the night when the world feels emptied out. It was a dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across pavement. I lay there in the dark, listening. The sound moved slowly past my window, accompanied by labored breathing. Then, it stopped, right outside my door. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't move, didn't even breathe, just listened. Then came the knocking. Not loud or aggressive, soft, almost gentle. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't answer, didn't move. I remembered what the woman said. Don't open your door for anyone after midnight. Hello? A man's voice muffled through the door. I'm sorry to bother you. My car broke down. Can I use your phone? I stayed silent, pulling the covers up to my chin like they could protect me. Another knock, slightly harder. Please, I really need help. My wife is sick. We need to call for help. Something about the way he said it felt off. The tone was flat, almost rehearsed, like he was reading from a script. And if his wife was sick, why was he knocking on random motel room doors instead of going to the office? I heard him try the door handle. It rattled, but held. Thank God I'd locked it and used the chain lock. I know you're in there, he said, and now all pretense of friendliness was gone from his voice. I can hear you breathing. My blood went cold. The room was completely dark and silent. How could he possibly hear me breathing through a door? Unless he was lying, trying to get me to respond, to confirm someone was inside. I stayed frozen, barely allowing myself to breathe at all. Open the door. It wasn't a request anymore. Open the fucking door. He started pounding on it hard, that the chain rattled and the entire frame shook. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911, but I had no signal. One bar flickering in and out. Not enough to make a call. The pounding continued for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute or two. Then it stopped abruptly. Silence. I waited in the dark, every muscle tensed, listening for footsteps or breathing, or any sign of him. Then I heard the dragging sound again, moving away from my door, fading into the distance. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat up in bed with my car keys in my hand, ready to run if I heard him come back. But he didn't. As soon as the first gray light of dawn started filtering through the gaps in the curtains, I quickly packed my things and loaded up my car. I wanted to get the hell out of there as fast as possible. But I was also curious and honestly a little angry. I wanted answers. I went to the office. The same old woman was there, in the same spot, wearing the same house coat, watching the same TV. For a moment, I wondered if she'd moved at all during the night. Someone tried to break into my room last night, I said, my voice shaking. A man. He was pounding on my door, demanding I let him in. She didn't look surprised. Didn't even look away from the TV. Did you open the door? Then there's no problem. She finally glanced at me. I told you not to open the door after midnight. You don't understand. He was trying to... I understand perfectly. This is the kind of place where certain people come. People who are running from something or looking for something. I can't control who parks in my lot, but I can tell my guests to keep their doors locked. Did you keep your door locked? Yes, but... Then you're fine. You leave your key on the counter and have a safe trip. I stared at her, waiting for more, but she just turned back to her TV. I dropped the key and left. As I was pulling out of the parking lot, I noticed something I hadn't seen in the dark the night before. There were long scrape marks on the pavement, leading from one end of the motel to the other, like someone had been dragging something heavy. They ended right in front of room 7.
I drove straight through to Albuquerque, not stopping except for gas. Every time I checked my rearview mirror, part of me expected to see that man from the motel standing in the road behind me. Years later, I tried looking up the Desert Rose Motor Inn online. I wanted to leave a review, warn other people about what happened. But I couldn't find any record of it. No website, no listings on travel sites, no reviews at all. It was like the place didn't exist. Sometimes I wonder if maybe it doesn't anymore. Or maybe it never did. But I still have the receipt the old woman gave me, folded up in my wallet. Desert Rose Motor Inn, room 7, $60 cash. And I still remember what she said. Don't open your door for anyone after midnight.
The summer I turned 26, I was driving cross-country to start a new job in Portland. I'd quit my position at a marketing firm in Atlanta pretty abruptly after a bad breakup, and a college friend offered to let me crash with her while I got settled in the Pacific Northwest. I decided to make a whole thing of it. Take 2 weeks, see the country, stop at weird roadside attractions, eat at local diners, the whole romantic vision of the American road trip. I'd planned my route to hit a bunch of national parks and interesting small towns. On day 8 of the trip, I was somewhere in South Dakota, and I'd gotten turned around trying to find a scenic overlook that was supposed to have these incredible views. My GPS kept losing signal, and the paper map I'd bought wasn't detailed enough for the back roads I'd ended up on. By the time I admitted I was properly lost, it was getting dark, and I was in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Rolling hills, the occasional farmhouse in the distance, no towns, no gas stations, nothing. My gas tank was sitting at just under a quarter full, and I was starting to genuinely worry. Then, like a miracle, I saw lights ahead. Not street lights or a town, just a cluster of lights in the darkness. As I got closer, I saw it was a motel. The sign said the Whispering Pines Motel in cheerful green letters, which was funny because there wasn't a pine tree in sight, just flat grassland in every direction. There were about a dozen cars in the parking lot, which made me feel better. Other people were staying here, so it couldn't be that sketchy, right? The main office was warm and brightly lit, decorated with landscape paintings and fake plants. A man in his 50s stood behind the counter, wearing a polo shirt and a friendly smile. "Welcome to the Whispering Pines," he said. "Looking for a room?" "Yes, please. Just for tonight." "You got it. We've got a few rooms available. You want a single or a double?" "Single's fine." "Great. That'll be $75. We take cards." Already, this place was light years better than the Desert Rose. I handed over my credit card, and he processed it efficiently. "You're in room 14, he said, handing me a proper key card. "Second floor, middle of the building. We've got free coffee in the lobby starting at 6 a.m., and there's a vending machine on each floor. Wi-Fi password is Whispering Pines 2024, all one word." "Thank you so much. Is there anywhere nearby to get food?" "Oh, sorry. No. Nearest restaurant is about 20 miles back the way you came, but there's a microwave in your room if you've got anything to heat up." I thanked him again and headed up to my room. The stairs were clean, the hallway was well lit, and room 14 was actually nice. Updated furniture, a decent TV, a bathroom that looked like it had been renovated in the past few years. I was relieved. I ate some beef jerky and crackers from my road trip stash, watched some TV, and started getting ready for bed around 10:30. I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth when I heard it. Whispering. It was coming from the wall. Soft, sibilant, multiple voices all talking at once, but too quiet to make out any words. Just this constant susurrus of whispered conversation. My first thought was that the walls were thin, and I was hearing the TV or conversation from the next room. But as I listened more carefully, it didn't sound like TV dialogue. It was too layered, too many voices. I put my ear against the wall. The whispering got louder, but I still couldn't make out any words. It sounded like dozens of people all whispering at the same time. Then I realized the whispering wasn't just coming from one wall. It was coming from all of them. I stood in the middle of the room, slowly turning, and the whispering surrounded me. From the wall adjoining the next room, from the wall that opened to the hallway, from the exterior wall, from the ceiling. It was soft enough that if I turned on the TV or played music, I could drown it out. But the moment I turned off the sound, there it was again. This constant, unnerving whisper. I tried to convince myself it was the building settling or the wind or the pipes. Old buildings make weird noises, right? But this didn't sound like building sounds. It sounded like voices.
I turned on the TV, cranked the volume up higher than I normally would, and got into bed. I was exhausted from driving, and I told myself I'd just ignore it and go to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come. Even with the TV blaring, I could feel the whispering. It was like it was inside my head now, bypassing my ears entirely. Around 1 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my room key and went downstairs, planning to ask the front desk guy about it. Maybe it was a known issue with the building, something he could explain. But the lobby was empty. The lights were still on. The TV behind the counter was playing, but there was no one there. "Hello?" I called out. No response. I rang the bell on the counter. Once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. I noticed there was a door behind the counter, probably leading to a back office or storage room. It was slightly ajar. "Excuse me," I called toward the door. "Is anyone here?" The whispering suddenly got louder, so much louder. It was coming from everywhere now, from the walls, from the ceiling, from behind that door. A cacophony of desperate whispered voices, and now I could finally make out some of the words. "Help us. Please. Don't leave. Stay with us. Join us." I backed away from the counter, my heart racing. The whispering continued, growing more insistent. "Help us. Help us. Help us." I ran back to my room, locked the door, and shoved the dresser in front of it. I grabbed my car keys and my phone. I wasn't staying here another second. But when I pulled back the curtains to look at the parking lot, I froze. All the cars were still there. All dozen or so of them, parked in the exact same spots they'd been when I arrived. But every single one of them was covered in dust and dirt. Not a light coating, but thick layers, like they'd been sitting there for months or years. Dead leaves were piled up around the tires. One of them had a spider web stretched across the driver's side door. These cars hadn't moved in a very, very long time. I looked at the other rooms, the ones that supposedly had guests. Every window was dark. Not curtains drawn dark, but empty dark. The darkness of rooms that had never been occupied. The whispering in the walls grew louder still, almost frantic now. "Don't leave. Stay. Join us. Help us." I shoved the dresser away from the door and ran, down the stairs, through the lobby, out into the parking lot. I didn't look back. I got in my car, started the engine, and floored it. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced in my rearview mirror one last time. The motel was still there, all lit up, looking warm and inviting. And every single window, including the window to room 14, had a face pressed against the glass. Pale, drawn faces with dark, hollow eyes and mouths open in silent screams. Or maybe not silent. Maybe they were whispering. I drove for 3 hours straight,
not stopping until I reached a well-lit truck stop with dozens of other travelers. I sat in my car in the parking lot shaking until the sun came up. When I finally worked up the nerve to check my credit card statement, there was no charge from the Whispering Pines Motel. I tried finding it on a map later, retracing my route, but I couldn't. That stretch of road was there, but there was no motel marked anywhere along it. I've driven cross-country 3 more times since then, always making sure I never deviate from my planned route, never ending up on empty back roads after dark. And I never, ever stay at a motel whose parking lot is too full for a place in the middle of nowhere. This happened to me in 1996. I was 32 years old, working as an insurance adjuster, and I did a lot of driving for work. My territory covered a huge chunk of rural Idaho and Montana, so I was constantly on the road, staying in different motels, eating at different diners, basically living out of my car in a suitcase. I'd stayed in dozens of roadside motels at that point. You develop a kind of sixth sense for them. You can tell the good ones from the bad ones pretty quickly. The good ones are clean, quiet, maybe a little dated, but well-maintained. The bad ones are dirty, sketchy. The kind of place where you keep your shoes on even in bed and don't touch anything more than absolutely necessary. And then there's a third category. The ones that seem fine at first, but have something fundamentally wrong with them. Something you can't quite put your finger on until it's too late. The Pine View Lodge fell into that third category. I pulled in around 8 p.m. on a Wednesday night. It was October, and the weather was already turning cold. The place looked decent enough from the outside. 2-story building, maybe 20 rooms, well-lit parking lot, a neon sign that actually worked. The office was in a separate small building, and through the window I could see a young woman, probably early 20s, reading a magazine behind the counter. I went in, and she looked up with a practiced smile. "Hi there. Room for one? Please." "How many nights?" "Just a night. I'll be back on the road tomorrow morning." "Okay. We have a room on the second floor available. $80. I handed her my company credit card, and she processed it. She gave me a real key, not a key card, attached to a diamond-shaped plastic tag with the room number stamped on it. Room 23. "Second floor, all the way at the end," she said. "Ice machine is on the first floor near the office. Checkout is 11 a.m. "Thanks." As I was leaving, she called after me. "Oh, one more thing. If you need anything during the night, don't call the front desk. I go home at 10, and there's no night staff. Just write down whatever you need and leave a note, and someone will take care of it in the morning." "No problem." I grabbed my overnight bag from the car and headed upstairs. Room 23 was at the far end of the building, last door on the right. The room was fine. Nothing special, but clean enough. I dropped my bag on the bed, used the bathroom, and decided to take a walk to stretch my legs before settling in for the night. The Pine View Lodge was surrounded by woods, and there was a small path that led from the parking lot into the trees. A hand-painted sign said Nature Trail, 0.5 miles. I figured I had time before it got fully dark, so I followed it. The trail wound through pine trees, hence the name, I guess, and opened up to a small clearing with a view of the mountains in the distance. It was peaceful. I stood there for a few minutes, just breathing in the cold air, then headed back. By the time I returned to the motel, it was properly dark, and the parking lot had emptied out considerably. When I'd arrived, there had been maybe 8 or 9 cars. Now there were only 3, including mine. The office was dark. The girl had gone home, just like she said. I went back to my room, ordered a pizza from a place that somehow delivered even out here, and watched TV while I ate. Around 11 p.m., I got ready for bed. That's when I heard the footsteps. They were coming from the room above me, which was weird because I was on the second floor. There was no third floor. The footsteps were heavy and deliberate, back and forth, like someone pacing. I tried to ignore it, but the footsteps continued, pacing for hours. Every time I was about to drift off to sleep, I hear them again, back and forth, back and forth. At one point, I got so frustrated that I grabbed a broom from the closet and banged on the ceiling. The footsteps stopped immediately. Silence. I waited, listening. Then the footsteps started again, directly above my head, even heavier than before. And then I heard something else, a dragging sound, like furniture being moved. It scraped across the floor above me, loud enough to make me wince. This went on for another 20 minutes. Footsteps, dragging, more footsteps. Finally, I'd had enough. I grabbed my room key and went outside, planning to go upstairs and see what the hell was going on up there. But when I stepped out of my room and looked up, I realized something that made my blood run cold. There was no third floor. The building was only 2 stories. I was on the second floor, in the last room. Above me was just the roof. I stood there in the cold night air, staring up at the roofline, and as I watched, I heard the footsteps again, clear as day, coming from directly above my room, from the roof. I slowly walked along the balcony, moving toward the stairs, and the footsteps followed me. They stayed directly above me, matching my pace. When I stopped, they stopped. When I moved, they moved. I ran down the stairs, across the parking lot, to my car. I got in, locked the doors, and looked up at the roof. There was nothing there. No one standing on the roof, no visible source for the sounds, but I could still hear them. Even from inside my car with the doors closed, I could hear the footsteps on the roof, pacing back and forth, right over where my room was. I sat in my car for the rest of the night, dozing fitfully, jumping awake every time a sound startled me. As soon as the sky started to lighten with dawn, I went back to my room, grabbed my bag, and got the hell out. I didn't even check out properly. I just left the key on the front desk counter and drove away. Later, I mentioned the Pineview Lodge to a colleague who covered some of the same territory. Pineview? The place out near Coeur d'Alene? Yeah. That place has been closed for like 3 years. Owner went bankrupt. What? No, I stayed there last month. There was a girl at the front desk and everything. He shook his head. Not possible. I drove past it a couple of months ago. The windows are all boarded up. There's a condemned sign on the front door. I pulled up my credit card statement right there in front of him. No charge from Pineview Lodge. Nothing. I did some research after that. Turns out the Pineview Lodge had been the site of a murder-suicide. Back in 1989, a man staying in room 23 killed his girlfriend, then went up to the roof and jumped. His body was found the next morning on the pavement outside room 23. Apparently, in the years after, multiple guests reported hearing footsteps on the roof and seeing a man's silhouette standing on the edge. The place finally closed down in 1994 after bookings dropped to almost nothing. Nobody wanted to stay there anymore. But I did stay there. In 1996, 2 years after it closed. The girl at the front desk, the other cars in the parking lot, the pizza delivery guy who brought my order, none of it was real. Except the footsteps on the roof. Those were real.
I need to tell you about something that happened to my sister 5 years ago. She's never talked about it publicly, but she gave me permission to share it because she thinks people should know. She thinks it might save someone's life. My sister Rachel was 29 at the time, working as a pharmaceutical sales rep. Her job required a lot of travel throughout the southwestern states, mainly Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. She was good at her job, made good money, and was comfortable with the travel lifestyle. In March of that year, she was driving from Albuquerque to El Paso for a meeting. She'd made the drive dozens of times before and knew the route well. But this particular trip, she got a late start and ended up driving after dark, which she usually tried to avoid. Around 10 p.m., she was somewhere between Las Cruces and El Paso when her check engine light came on. The car started making a concerning noise, and she knew she needed to pull over before whatever was wrong got worse. She saw a sign for a town called Redstone 5 miles ahead. She'd never heard of it, but if it was big enough to have a freeway exit, it probably had a gas station or motel where she could at least park safely for the night and call for a tow in the morning. The Redstone exit was dark. No lights, no buildings visible from the off-ramp, but there was a 2-lane road leading away from the highway and a faded sign that said, Redstone, 3 miles. Rachel followed it, her car coughing and sputtering, barely making it up the slight incline. After 3 miles of empty darkness, she finally saw lights ahead. A cluster of buildings, maybe a dozen, and a sign that said, Welcome to Redstone, New Mexico, population 68. The town was tiny. A gas station that looked closed, a shuttered general store, a post office, and at the far end of the main street, a motel. The motel sign said, Redstone Motor Court, in faded red letters. The office light was on. Rachel pulled into the parking lot, relieved. There were 2 other cars there, which made her feel better about the place. The office was cramped and musty, decorated with Old West memorabilia and sun-faded photographs of the area. An elderly man sat behind the counter, watching a TV that was showing static. Help ya? He asked without looking away from the static. I need a room. My car broke down. $40, cash only. Rachel usually paid with her corporate card, but she had cash for emergencies. She handed over 2 20s. The old man took them, pulled a key from a drawer, and slid it across the counter. The key had a plastic tag that said 4 in marker. Rooms round back. Checkouts at noon. Is there a mechanic in town or a tow service? Nope. Oh, well, is there cell phone service? I need to call. Nope. Rachel waited for him to elaborate, but he just turned back to the static on the TV. She took the key and left. Room 4 was around the back of the building, the last room in a row of 6. The door was painted brown, the paint peeling in large flakes. Rachel unlocked it and stepped inside. The room was sparse. A bed, a nightstand, a lamp, a wooden chair, no TV, no phone, no bathroom. There was a separate bathroom building a few yards away, which she could see from her window. It was rustic, sure, but Rachel had stayed in worse. She locked the door, wedged the chair under the handle for extra security, and lay down on the bed. She must have dozed off because she woke up to the sound of screaming. A woman's voice, high-pitched and terrified, screaming, "No, please, no!" Rachel sat up, her heart pounding. The screaming was coming from outside, somewhere nearby. She went to the window and pulled back the curtain. The parking lot was visible from her window, and she could see a man dragging a woman toward one of the other rooms. The woman was fighting, but the man was much larger and easily overpowered her. He unlocked one of the room doors and shoved her inside. Rachel's mind raced. She needed to help, but how?
She had no phone, no way to call police. She couldn't even call the front office because there was no phone in the room. She made a decision. She'd run to the office, make the old man call the police. She grabbed her key and eased open her door as quietly as possible. The parking lot was silent now. No more screaming. She didn't know if that was good or bad. Rachel ran towards the office, but when she reached the front of the building, she stopped. The office was dark, completely dark. The light she'd seen when she checked in was off, and through the window she could see the place was empty. She tried the door anyway, locked. She banged on it. "Hello, I need help. There's an emergency." No response. She looked around desperately. The gas station was closed. Everything was closed. The entire town was dark, except for the faint light from the few occupied motel rooms. Then she heard it again, the woman screaming, but this time it was cut off abruptly. Rachel ran back toward the rooms, not sure what she was going to do, but knowing she had to do something. As she approached the room where she'd seen the man drag the woman, she saw the door was ajar. Light spilled out into the parking lot. She crept closer, her legs shaking, and peered through the gap in the door. The room was empty. Not just empty of people, empty of everything. No furniture, no bed, no lamp, just bare walls, bare floor, and a thick layer of dust. It looked like no one had been in that room for years. Rachel backed away slowly, her breath coming in short gasps. Then she heard footsteps behind her and spun around. The old man from the office was standing there, watching her with an expression that was hard to read. "You need to go back to your room," he said quietly. "There was a woman. A man was hurting her. I saw—" "You didn't see anything. Go back to your room." "I'm leaving right—" "Your car don't work." "I don't care. I'll walk." The old man stepped closer, and there was something in his eyes that made Rachel's blood run cold. Not anger, not threat, pity. "You can't leave Redstone after dark. No one can. You go back to your room, lock your door, and wait for sunrise. Then you can leave." "What are you talking about? I'm leaving right—" "You try to leave now, you'll end up like them." He gestured vaguely toward the empty rooms. "The ones who don't listen, the ones who try to leave after dark." Rachel didn't wait to hear more. She ran to her car, got in, and turned the key. The engine coughed but wouldn't start. She tried again. Nothing. She looked up and saw the old man still standing in the parking lot, watching her. She had no choice. She went back to her room, locked the door, wedged the chair under the handle again, and sat on the bed with her keys clutched in her hand, waiting for sunrise. She didn't sleep. She couldn't. All night she heard sounds outside. Footsteps, whispers. At one point, someone tried her door handle, jiggling it softly, testing to see if it was locked. She sat frozen, barely breathing until the sound stopped. As soon as the first light of dawn appeared, Rachel grabbed her things and went to her car. The engine started on the first try. She drove out of Redstone, back to the highway, and didn't stop until she reached El Paso. Her car ran perfectly. Whatever had been wrong with it was suddenly, inexplicably fixed. Later, she tried to find Redstone on a map. There was no town by that name, no exit between Las Cruces and El Paso that matched where she turned off. She filed a police report anyway, describing everything she'd seen and heard. The detective she spoke with was polite but skeptical. Without a location, without even evidence that the town existed, there was nothing they could do. Rachel quit her job a month later. She couldn't handle the driving anymore, couldn't handle staying in motels. Even now, 5 years later, she won't travel alone, won't stay anywhere she hasn't thoroughly researched online. She's convinced that Redstone is still out there, somewhere along that dark stretch of highway, and that other travelers, people whose cars break down at just the wrong time, are still finding it, still checking in, and some of them, the ones who don't listen, who try to leave after dark, are still there.
When I was 24, I was trying to make it as a musician. I played guitar and did some singing, and I'd managed to book a small tour opening for a friend's band. Nothing major, just dive bars and small clubs up and down the West Coast, but it felt like the start of something. The tour was in late July, and we were driving from Portland to Sacramento, a long haul that we had broken up with a stop in Redding. But when we got to Redding, the venue had double booked, and we got bumped. We were pissed, exhausted, and stuck with nowhere to stay since we'd planned to crash with the venue owner. It was almost midnight, and we were standing in a gas station parking lot trying to figure out our next move, when one of the guys found a motel listing online. The Starlight Inn, about 40 miles outside of Redding. The photos looked decent, and the price was reasonable. We called, they had rooms available, and we headed out. The drive took us deeper into the mountains, away from the highway, onto progressively smaller and more winding roads. Cell service dropped to nothing about 20 miles in. I was driving, and I remember thinking we should turn back, but everyone else was half asleep, and I didn't want to be the one to suggest we'd made a mistake. Finally, we saw the sign, the Starlight Inn. The neon star above the letters was flickering, giving the whole place a stuttering, disorienting glow. The motel was bigger than I expected, maybe 30 rooms arranged in a U-shape around a central courtyard with an empty swimming pool. The pool was filled with dead leaves and looked like it hadn't seen water in years. There were a few other cars in the lot, beat-up sedans and trucks that had seen better days. I went into the office while the others waited in the van. The woman behind the counter was probably in her 40s, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a Starlight Inn polo shirt that looked 2 sizes too big. We called earlier. 4 rooms? Right. Yeah. She didn't smile, just pulled out a clipboard and slid it across the counter. Need you all to sign in. Names and license plate number. We'd never had to do that at any other motel, but I figured maybe it was a small town thing. I signed for all of us, filled in the van's plate number, and she handed me 4 keys. Rooms 12, 13, 14, and 15. All in a row. Checkouts at 10 a.m. Pool's closed. Don't go wandering around outside after midnight. That last part felt less like a suggestion and more like a rule. Why not? She finally looked at me, really looked at me, and her expression was flat and serious. Because I'm telling you not to. You want the rooms or not? Yeah, we do. Then don't go outside after midnight. I took the keys and left. The rooms were basic but clean. We were all so tired that nobody cared. We agreed to meet up at 9 a.m. to grab breakfast and hit the road. I collapsed onto the bed in room 14 and was asleep within minutes. I woke up to the sound of music. It was faint, tinny, like it was coming from an old radio. Big band music, the kind my grandparents used to listen to. I checked my phone. 12:47 a.m. I listened for a minute, trying to figure out where it was coming from. It sounded like it was outside, somewhere in the courtyard. I remembered what the woman at the desk had said. Don't go wandering around outside after midnight. But I was curious, and honestly, a little annoyed. I had paid for a room, and if someone was having a party in the courtyard, I had a right to tell them to keep it down. I pulled on my jeans and shoes, grabbed my room key, and stepped outside. The courtyard was empty. The music was louder now, though. It was definitely coming from somewhere nearby, echoing off the walls of the motel. I walked toward the empty pool, following the sound. As I got closer, I realized the music was coming from inside the pool, from the bottom of it, underneath all those dead leaves.
I stood at the edge looking down. The pool was deep, maybe 9 feet at the far end. The leaves were piled thick, and beneath them I could see something glowing, a faint, pulsing light. The music got louder, and now I could hear something else beneath it. Voices, people talking and laughing, the sound of glasses clinking like a party happening somewhere far away. I don't know what possessed me, but I climbed down the ladder into the pool. The leaves crunched under my feet, dry and brittle. I walked toward the deep end, toward the light, pushing leaves aside with my shoes. That's when I saw it. There was a door, set into the bottom of the pool, a wooden door with a brass handle, and light was seeping out around the edges. The music was coming from behind the door, so were the voices. I crouched down, brushing away more leaves, and I could feel warmth radiating from the door. I reached for the handle. I wouldn't do that if I were you. I jerked back and looked up. The woman from the front desk was standing at the edge of the pool, looking down at me. "What is this?" I asked. "Something that's none of your business. Get out of the pool." "There's a door. There's people down there. I can hear them." "No, there's not. Not anymore. Now get out." I climbed back up the ladder, and she was waiting for me at the top. Up close, I could see she looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her hands were shaking slightly. "I told you not to come outside after midnight. What's behind that door?"
She stared at me for a long moment, like she was deciding whether to tell me the truth or not. Finally, she sighed. "This place used to be different. Back in the 50s, it was a resort. Rich people came here. Hollywood types. People with money. There was a speakeasy in the basement, under the pool. Illegal gambling. Booze. All kinds of stuff that wasn't allowed back then. It burned down in 1959. 23 people died in that fire, trapped in the basement because the only exit was blocked. Jesus. Every night at midnight, the door appears, and if you're stupid enough to open it, you'll hear the party, you'll see the lights, and it'll seem like the most inviting, exciting place you've ever seen. The music will sound incredible. The people will sound like they're having the time of their lives. And if you go through that door, you'll never come back." I felt cold despite the summer heat. Where does it go? Where do you think? Those people burned to death 70 years ago, but they're still down there, still having their party, and they want company. They want people to join them. I looked back at the pool. The music had stopped. The light was gone. It was just a pool full of dead leaves again. Has anyone... 3 people in the last 10 years. They didn't listen. They went through the door. She pulled a cigarette from her pocket and lit it with shaking hands. We find their cars in the morning. Their rooms are empty. Their things are still there. But they're gone. Why don't you just fill in the pool? We tried. Twice. The door comes back. You can't get rid of it. She took a long drag. That's why I tell people not to go outside after midnight. Most listen. Some don't. Why do you still run this place? Because it's my family's motel. Has been since 1962. My grandfather bought it after the fire. Thought he could make it work. Thought the past didn't matter. He was wrong. But by the time he figured that out, he'd sunk everything into it. So did my father. Now it's mine. She looked at me with tired, sad eyes. I keep it open because I have to, but I try to keep people safe. I try to warn them. I went back to my room and didn't sleep the rest of the night. At 6 a.m., I woke up the others and told them we were leaving. They complained, but I didn't care. I practically dragged them to the van. The woman was in the office when I dropped off the keys. She nodded at me, a silent acknowledgement. "Thank you for stopping me." She replied, "Just drive safe." We left the Starlight Inn and never went back. I looked it up online later, and it's still there, still operating. The reviews are mostly positive, with a few complaints about noise at night and the weird vibe. One review, from about 6 months ago, stuck with me. It said,
Nice place, but our friend disappeared on the last night. Police came but couldn't find him. His stuff was still in his room, but he was gone. If you stay here, don't go outside after midnight." The reviewer's name was marked as Family of James K. I wonder if James K is still at that party, still hearing that music, still thinking he made the right choice when he opened that door. I wonder how many people are down there now, dancing and drinking and laughing, not realizing they're never going to leave.
This last story isn't mine. It's my uncle's. He told it to me years ago, and it's the reason I'm so careful about where I stay when I travel. My uncle, Robert, was a long-haul trucker for 30 years. He's retired now, but back in the early 2000s, he was on the road constantly, crisscrossing the country, delivering everything from furniture to auto parts. He'd stayed in hundreds of motels and truck stops over the years, most of them blurred together in his memory, but there was one place he never forgot, a place he refused to ever go back to, even if it meant driving hours out of his way. It happened in 2003, somewhere in rural Pennsylvania. Uncle Robert had been driving for 14 hours straight and knew he was pushing it. He needed to sleep before he became a danger to himself and others on the road. He saw a sign for a place called the Mountain View Motel, 1 mile ahead. The name was optimistic. The area was flat farmland with no mountains in sight. But Robert didn't care. He just needed a bed. The motel was old, probably built in the 60s, and looked like it hadn't been updated since. The parking lot was nearly empty, just 2 other vehicles, both trucks like his. The office was manned by a teenage kid, probably 17 or 18, wearing a hoodie and playing on his phone. He barely looked up when Robert walked in. "Room for the night?" $50. Robert paid cash, got his key, room 8, and headed to his truck to grab his overnight bag. Room 8 was at the end of the building, ground floor. Robert unlocked it and stepped inside. The room was dated, but clean enough. He dropped his bag, took a quick shower, and got into bed. He was asleep almost instantly. The sound of crying woke him up. A child's crying, high-pitched and desperate, coming from somewhere nearby. Robert checked his watch, 3:14 a.m. The crying continued, and it sounded like it was coming from the room next to his, room 7. He listened for a minute, trying to decide what to do. The crying was persistent, not stopping or even pausing for breath. It sounded wrong somehow, mechanical. Finally, he got up, pulled on his jeans, and stepped outside. The parking lot was dark and quiet. The 2 trucks he'd seen earlier were still there. He walked over to room 7 and knocked on the door. "Hey, is everything okay in there?" The crying stopped immediately. Silence. Robert waited, listening. Nothing. "Hello?" Still nothing. He was about to go back to his room when he heard it again, but this time it wasn't coming from room 7. It was coming from room 6. The same child's crying, exactly the same pitch and rhythm. Robert walked over to room 6 and knocked. "Is there a kid in there? Are they okay?" The crying stopped. Then it started again in room 5. Robert felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't right. This wasn't natural. The crying moved again. Room 4, then room 3, then room 2. It was moving down the line of rooms one by one, getting closer to the office. Robert stood frozen in the parking lot, watching the dark windows, listening to the crying as it moved from room to room. Then it stopped. Complete silence. Robert stood there for a long moment, his heart pounding, not sure what to do. Then he heard a door open. The door to room 1, closest to the office. A figure stepped out. Small, child-sized, but the proportions were wrong. The limbs were too long, the head too big. It moved in a jerky, unnatural way like stop-motion animation. It turned toward Robert, and even though it was too dark to see details, he could feel it looking at him. Then it smiled. Robert could see the smile even in the darkness. Too wide, too many teeth. It started walking toward him, still moving in that jerky, wrong way. Robert ran. He didn't go back to his room to get his bag. He didn't go to the office to complain or ask for help. He just ran to his truck, got in, and drove. He drove straight through the rest of the night, not stopping until he was 3 states away. When he finally felt safe enough to pull over, he realized he'd left everything in room 8. His bag, his clothes, even his wallet was in his jeans pocket in that room. He called the motel from a payphone, planning to ask them to ship his things to him. The phone rang and rang. No one answered. He tried again later that day. Same thing. He tried again the next day, and this time he got a recording. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Uncle Robert tried to find the Mountain View Motel online to see if they had a website or contact information. He couldn't find anything. He drove back to Pennsylvania a month later, retracing his route, trying to find the exit he'd taken. But he couldn't find it. That stretch of highway was there, but there was no exit, no sign for the Mountain View Motel. He asked at gas stations and diners in the area. No one had heard of a Mountain View Motel. It was like the place had never existed. But Robert knew it had. He'd been there. He'd paid for a room. He'd heard the crying moving from room to room. He'd seen that thing come out of room 1. And he'd left his wallet there, with his license and credit cards and cash. He had to cancel all his cards, get a new license, and explain to his wife why he'd lost everything. He never told her the truth. He just said he'd been robbed at a truck stop. But he told me years later, after he'd retired and didn't have to drive those routes anymore. He told me because he wanted me to know, wanted me to be careful, wanted me to understand that there are places out there, places that exist in the spaces between where they should be, that open up for travelers at just the wrong time. Places that look normal, that seem safe, but are anything but. If you ever stay at a motel in the middle of nowhere, and something feels wrong, even slightly wrong, you leave. You don't wait to see what happens. You don't try to be rational about it. You just leave. I've followed his advice ever since. And I'm telling you now, because you might need to know someday. There are motels out there that shouldn't exist. And if you find yourself checking into one, if you realize too late that something is very wrong, remember what my uncle said. Just leave. Don't pack your bags, don't check out properly, don't try to understand, just get in your car and drive. Because whatever is in that motel, whatever is pretending to be normal and safe and welcoming, it doesn't want you to leave. And if you stay too long, you won't be able to.